on the wrong planet. I wanted to rule the world from Mars. I like the looks of that place.
Yes, I think you'd be more comfortable there at the moment, Joker.
Hey everyone, it's Sleepy Reader, aka Damien. I'm having some nitro brew coffee with nitro cold brew coffee with some trendy oat milk in it. Not sour this time. The sour coffee that I had a few episodes ago was actually because the can had sat on my shelf too long, like it was a year old. And apparently these cans do have due dates beyond which it can go bad. I did not know some canned coffee like that could go bad. But it can. So before I dive into the 12 comics that I bought on June 22nd, I just wanted to mention a few things that I want to mention. About a month ago or so, at the end of one of these episodes, I put a list of the people who do comic book reviews every week that I watch and like. There's not a lot of them. It's sometimes hard to find the people who really do this kind of thing every week. And I left off one that I try to watch every week, which was Pocan Joe. And Joe is very clever, a bit eccentric, and reads a lot of DC and some Marvel and some indies, and it's definitely always cool to catch what he has to say. So I'll definitely link him down below. And maybe I'll try to dig up whichever episode I created that list in. It was in one of my countdowns, and put the link to that too for anyone who might have missed that and is interested. Because I think all of the people I put on that list are still, cross my fingers, still doing weekly comic book reviews, which is hard to keep up with. Every week I just barely make it, and I do it much later than everyone else. So, but I have been busy. I on Sunday I was on Will, the Comic Beast. Beast show. Will has a new channel called The Comic Beast. He's Will from The Hero and the Kid, which turned into a weightlifting, workout, motivational kind of channel. So he's moved his comic book hobby over to a new channel, The Comic Beast, and he does a monthly wrap-up show for the best of June. And he had me and a bunch of other people on. I was a guest, and there were some regular panel members, and another guest was John Comics with Kids. Anyway, that was a lot of fun, and I'll put a link to that below. And if the sound is kind of so-so, it might be my fault on that show, because it's possible my microphone was having issues. One of my microphones seems to be working, and then part of it becomes loose, and it causes trouble. And then 2 weeks ago, I was on Meanwhile at the Podcast again with George, and we talked about sitcoms. And then yesterday, we recorded another chat that's going to be on this Saturday, where we talk about a whole bunch of things, including things we drink and comic books, and it was a very fun, meandering conversation. So I'll have links to Meanwhile at the Podcast below here also. So I guess that's kind of catching up with everything. Last few weeks have called myself Grumpy Reader. I have no reason to do that this week. Every single of these 12 comics was a good read. I enjoyed them all. So it's kind of tough putting some at the bottom, but it's my subjective ranking of these comics based on what I enjoyed the most. And this is my comic diary, so I just want to keep it up. So yeah, they were all quite good. I'm still in a slightly grumpy frame of mind in general. There was a heat wave. My back spasm or whatever is mostly healed, but it's still nagging at me a little bit. So somehow I still felt like maybe I should cut back on comics, even, is the thrill, or I'm always seeking the comic book thrill But my standards keep getting higher and higher, and it's harder and harder to thrill me, maybe. I don't know. Or just maybe just random biology of the week. Whatever's going on inside my body is going to affect my enjoyment. I don't know. So I put in at number 12, Cowboy Bebop. The final issue of this storyline, probably given that the Cowboy Bebop show's been long canceled on Netflix or wherever it was. Yeah, Netflix. I'm guessing we won't see any more Cowboy Bebop comics from Titan. This was written by Dan Waters, which was a brilliant choice of Titan to hire a writer of his caliber and his daring to do a comic like this. The most daring issue was number 2, and it's kind of overall, despite the really cool stuff in issue number 2, it's kind of shaped up to be a more sort of standard crime cons within cons kind of thing. It was kind of pretty clever. I mean, I enjoyed it. Loved the art throughout all 4 issues of this. So if it might be a good read in a trade or a digital trade from the library or something. It's a fun little romp. Then I put in at number 11, Black Adam number 1. I can't even remember why I picked this up because I didn't plan to. Maybe because I was trying, since we were covering the best comics of June, and some people had talked about liking Black Adam. I thought I'd read that before doing Will's show. But also, I'm always curious as to what Christopher Priest, the writer, is up to. And he is up to a bunch of interesting things here. He's doing his usual lately chapter kind of thing. I think they're chapters. It's interesting. He actually names a real galaxy that is one of the smaller galaxies in our local galactic cluster. So one evening, Black Adam is off fighting what appears to be Darkseid in another galaxy, a galaxy that is 50,000 light years from Earth. I happen to have been reading about galaxies with my daughter recently, so I was able to quickly double check that fact. And then the next morning, he is back in New York City having discussions with the United Nations, I believe. So those 50,000 light years don't take long for Black Adam to travel. Now, why would you even be in another galaxy fighting Darkseid? Why is Darkseid in that galaxy? Anyway, it's a smaller galaxy than ours. Our galaxy probably has 200 billion stars. It might only have a quarter of that or something. I don't know. Or even less. I'm not sure. It's a smaller galaxy. I'm getting myself off track. So this was mostly enjoyable. It had very cool art. Who's the artist? It's always hard to find the credits. Sandoval. Rafa Sandoval. And color by Matt Herms. And if I were interested in Black Adam, curious about him, I would think this is kind of cool. If I were interested in seeing, what's the right way to put it? Perhaps another African American hero being introduced, or I don't know if he's going to be a hero or a anti-hero, but it looks like we're going to get a Black Adam related African American hero. There's kind of some odd scenes in here where he's a doctor, or maybe it turns out later a medical student at a hospital, and he's confronting apparently a white nationalist patient. I guess I'm supposed to know that from these tattoos, but reading it at first, I thought this was kind of weird, and if I didn't know the writer was African American, I might have thought it was kind of a racist portrayal of a black person working in a hospital. I don't know. That was just a little weird. But it's kind of interesting. I think it's something I'll probably wait to read digitally later. Although who knows? I can never predict my whims when I go to the comic book store. speaking of whims, I've been getting Heavy Metal Drummer originally on a whim. I really kind of fell in love with its goofy punk indie horror feel. Even though it's called Heavy Metal Drummer, I consider it a very punk comic. And I loved the first 3 issues. This is issue 5, and I'm still liking it. But it's sort of like, it's not quite at the level of insanity that I thought it would be from those first 3 issues. So I'm ranking it at number 10. But like I said, everything was good this week. Love this cover. Maybe that's my favorite cover of the week. I don't know. Yeah, now I'm just enjoying looking at it. In at number 9 was Beware the Eye of Odin. And I really had trouble deciding where to rank this because I think this is a really cool comic. It is a Norse mythology-based fantasy story about a guy who comes into possession of this mythological literal Eye of Odin. He's been fighting trolls and such. And he's going to go on a bit of a quest because he has to return the Eye of Odin. I'm trying to remember, to Mimir, perhaps. That's the rightful... Mimir, the Frost Giant King, is the rightful bearer. So he gathers together inadvertently, because he wants to go alone, a little crew of companions to go off on their adventure. And it's got a cool art style. I'm not totally in love with the color hues, but it's not badly colored, and it's a cool art style. Lots of character and personality, both in the writing and the art. So he's going off on his quest with this one-armed blacksmith and a young girl who might be crazy, but who thinks she's a Valkyrie. So maybe she is a Valkyrie, given that we're in a fantasy story. And so they're all on their way to try to return the Eye of Odin to Mimir, and there's other people along the way, or creatures along the way, who will want to stop them from doing that. Kind of a basic setup, but done very well. I just wasn't particularly in the mood for this sort of fantasy story right now, so I was glad I sampled it, but I don't expect to keep reading it right now, but maybe someday in the future. I almost thought of just leaving it laying around and seeing if my daughter would be interested in it. I think the art style might not appeal to her. But anyway, it's an interesting comic. Someone on Twitter, I know exactly who on Twitter, Chris, seemed to be implying to me that this was the same author who did Vinyl. And if so, I'm very surprised, because it's nothing at all like Vinyl. I probably should double check that fact, but there's a really good page. You know, looking at this page reminds me of how the comic ends, and then I'm like, maybe I'll want to see what happens the next issue. I'm shallow. In at number 8, I put The Silver Coin. It's, most of you probably know about The Silver Coin. Every issue is by a different writer, same artist. The coin appears, and then mayhem ensues. There's the waitress at the diner kissing the coin. She makes a wish, and the coin makes it come true, and it comes true in a very horrific, horrible way. A really good, gross, disturbing short horror story. I ranked it where it is because I just wasn't that much in the mood for a horror story. But like I said, I liked every comic that came out this week. And I'm really curious if this character will show up again in future issues, because it added a little extra level, a little extra layer to the story, where there's someone who knows that this coin is evil and sets about having it do more evil things to more people. So there could be a whole set of stories there that James Tynion is giving as a gift to this series to maybe make it a little more cohesive. We'll see if the next writers pick up on that. In at number 7 is something completely different from most of what's going on in sort of mainstream indie comics. From its art style, I mean, one of the staples of mainstream indie comics. It's weird to say mainstream indie comics, but I think as opposed to sort of art comics, this pulpy indie comics is way out science fiction stories. But this takes a very different approach, and not just in the art, although I really get a kick out of this art by Robert Ahmed, an artist who I've been following for years on Twitter, and I've always enjoyed his work. In fact, I own an original piece by him, 2 original pieces by him, which I think I've shown a long time ago in a video, but really liked those commissions. And he confirmed on Twitter that he hand painted all of these pages directly on the paper, which he said was nerve-wracking because you can't make mistakes. But anyway, I think the effect is, kind of a very unique color effect. I wouldn't want every comic to look like this, but it makes this comic stand out and makes it a lot of fun. And it's just 4 issues. It's a world or a galaxy where everything comes in pairs. But this one set of twins, one of them has died and the other stayed alive. And that sets off, everyone becomes interested, like, how did you live when your twin died? And then we learn the real story behind that. I don't want to spoil it too much. And that opens up all kinds of issues with how things work in this galaxy. It's very free form. Fantasy flows into science fiction and vice versa. And it takes on serious stuff and totally crazy dreamlike stuff. It can feel like the Jetsons and the Flintstones, and it can feel like Nexus. I'm kind of ranking this, I'm maybe ranking this too low as I talk about it. I think the reason I put it kind of in the middle of the pack is I enjoyed it, but it felt, my main criticism of it is it maybe needs to be more like an 8-issue or 10-issue series. It feels too packed and jumbled, but in a way that's its strength, that it doesn't follow the normal pacing, that it's almost monolithic, the way so many comics have the same kind of pacing to them, and this has a very different pacing. So if you're interested in something different and you don't mind kind of the cartoony and the wild, zany mixing of so many things, and you like this kind of artwork, then this comic is highly recommended. It's only going to be 4 issues, so it'll very shortly appear in a trade, I believe. And that's from Source Point, which is a publisher that I'm just barely aware of what they do and what they're about. From a very familiar publisher, Dark Horse, a very kind of typical Dark Horse comic. Of course, it's the first comic written by Tyler Crook, and he also draws and colors and letters it. So it's a one-man show, and I really appreciate that. And Tyler Crook is, one of the best artists in kind of the Dark Horse stable. He also, I believe, always paints directly on the page. At least I've seen him at a shop when he was at a signing and there was no one around. He was just there painting on a page physically with watercolors. And I love the art in here. He's kind of takes a subdued approach with his colors. And I noticed he's also doing that in another comic where he does the coloring over someone else's pencils. So maybe he's there. My favorite work by him was actually a mini-series in the Black Hammer universe. What was it? About that crazy Adam Strange-like character who's unstuck in time. Captain Weird or something like that. Colonel Weird. And that was much more colorful. I'd like to see him do more sort of colorful sci-fi and not just the kind of browns and grays of horror. But this was still a really good read. I really love if the story had grabbed me more. Oh, there's my favorite page. If the story had grabbed me more, this might have been my number one comic of the week. But it's such a slow burn. We don't really know a whole lot about the story. We're kind of gathering together our two misfits with a connection to the magical world. This old man who, when he was a boy, was given a magical sword and horrible things happened. And now this girl who's some kind of magic MacGuffin that fell into her hands. Was it a coin or something? Not a silver coin. I can't remember. So anyway, it's definitely a comic to keep an eye on and see where it goes. Will it be just 4 issues, as is typical for Dark Horse Comics these days? I'm not sure. Oh, and I love that sword. It's not completely an original design of a sword. Is there a sword like that in that Berserk or Berserker comic? I think it's called Berserk, the Japanese cult manga. Anyway, still it looks cool. In at number 5 is the second issue of the revitalized Fables. I think I've mentioned before, I never read to the end. In fact, I only read the first 2 trades of the original Fables. So I know the basic setup of the original series, which was all these fables and fairy tale characters were trapped in our world. But now they're kind of returning to the worlds of magic. And it's beautifully, beautifully drawn by Buckingham. What's Buckingham's first name? It's weird. There's Willingham and Buckingham. There's Mark Buckingham and Bill Willingham. So Bill Willingham's the writer. The writing is good, but I think what's really keeping me on it is the art and colors. Steve Lealoa is the inker. That's actually, wow, I didn't even know he was still around in comics, but that's probably also, he's a significant artist going back to the Bronze Age. So no doubt he is a big contributor to the consistency and enjoyability of the visuals here, along with colorist extraordinaire Lee Lowridge. Never dissatisfied by a comic book when Lee Lowridge is the colorist, I have to say. So, so this issue just continues sort of exploring where things are going for some of these characters back in the fantasy world, including, I think, Geppetto. And I think I've heard rumors of what role Geppetto played towards the end of the previous series. And then I'm not sure who this character is, but she's taking over from a previous character as the Jack of the Green, and which I think is a cross between several different Jacks in fairy tales. So that's very satisfying. I probably would get more out of it if I went back and found the time to read the first 150 issues of Fables, which is very intimidating. In at number 4 is Aerosmith, number 6, the end, but it's only the halfway point of our actual story, but they're calling it an arc. And they're now, sadly, because of health issues, going to take, I think, a year off before they give us the rest of the story. And I'm really getting into the story now. We're getting more a lot of revelations, particularly in this issue, about the history of magic in Europe and some of the hints at the way magic works. And I'm really interested. I hope the health issues get worked out, and everybody involved can come back and finish this story, and hopefully do more Aerosmith stories. The only thing I'd say about Aerosmith is I still liked that first book better. I feel like Carlos Pacheco was even more on his game back then than he is now, although it's great artwork here. And I also feel like in the first arc, we kind of went from innocence to full mature sort of understanding of the horrors of war and such. But then we reset a bit in this Aerosmith series, and the hero is losing his naivety all over again, and that's, I don't know, slightly bothered me. But I think it still works. It works within the story they're telling here. It's just a little odd when you go from that first story to this second story. In at number 3, Usagi Yojimbo. Like I said, this whole week was full of good comics. So, Aerosmith could have been a number 1 comic. This definitely could have been a number 1 comic. Some of us who read Usagi have been saying that with the Usagi comic, it's either an A+, an A, or an A-. It never gets below an A-. I might give this one an A-, because, I mean, it was a lot of fun because it has this tribute, characters in here who are a tribute to Lone Wolf and Cub, which I haven't read, and yet the story felt more predictable to me as it progressed along, as some evil fellows, some evil nobles or whatever they were, or bureaucrats, try to set up the death of the Lone Goat and Kid, and possibly the death of Usagi by setting them against each other. But it and Stan Sakai never goes for the big surprises. It's usually more little subtle surprises in the way he makes the stories work out. But I just felt a little less amazed than I am with the normal Usagi story. So it's an A- Usagi. In at number 3. Number 1 was really hard to choose from, and I finally decided to put Newburn number 8 at number 2, not number 1. And I actually read number 7 and number 6, so I read 3 issues of Newburn all together, and they all kind of tie together and make fill in a lot of the backstory. I'm sorry, that was a really bad slip. Backstory of this black woman character whose name I can't remember, and that's very embarrassing. Is her name Sydney? I'm not sure. But so there's a whole complication and backstory in her. She trained to be a cop, which I don't think we knew earlier, because we knew her originally as kind of a con woman who gets caught by Newburn and then he hires her. But I really enjoy the way the story is flowing across these 3 issues. And so Newburn, which I thought might kind of burn out for me, is now much higher in my estimation than it was starting out. And I've always enjoyed Newburn. And I really, he's not, unfortunately, can get compared to his father. Jacob Phillips, though, I think is a very good storyteller. I like his coloring over his own art. And it's just a great package. Every issue has a backup story, and I've decided to wait to read the backup story till it's completed. Interesting. We won't get any more till fall of 2020. That's too bad, because I'm sitting at the edge of my chair to see what will happen next with Newburn. And I think we've been revealed that Newburn is more than he seems. Is he really the person running the mobs? Maybe secretly pulling the strings of the mobs in New York City, not just helping them out? Or is he also secretly using that power to do his own brand of justice through evil? Oops, I'm hitting my microphone a lot. Sorry about that. I'm getting excited by those thoughts. So it was tough, actually. I love Shaolin Cowboy, but it's always the same love, right? It's this is a continuation of the exact story that we had in issue 1 of this series of this volume of Shaolin Cowboy, and it just continues the mind-blowingly choreographed fight. But there's a lot to love here. I felt the colors were tuned to the printed page much better in this issue than the first issue. So I was able to take in the details much better. With the first issue, I actually went out and got the digital edition once the price of it went down a bit. So I could really enjoy the color there and take in all the detail. If you don't color it right, we miss out on all the detail that Jeff Darrow puts in. And the details are the story here. It in every little detail is Jeff Darrow expressing himself, expressing his sense of humor, his worldview, his bitterness, his joys. So we got this incredible fight scene with a flock of birds. I think in a way, he's looking for things that haven't been done before or that he hasn't done before. And then later, in a moment of craziness, Shaolin Cowboy, maybe to show off, cuts every feather off the last bird. And so then there's this naked bird running away. And then his magic opponent, who I don't really understand who the heck this guy is on the bizarre jellyfish-like creature who's for some reason attacking him, crazy magic guy. He calls Shaolin Cowboy a monkey. And then he uses his magic to make that remaining featherless bird grow into a giant. And so then the Shaolin Cowboy has to have a fight with a giant naked bird. It's just insanity. But it's part of this is like, seeing a really great Hong Kong action movie and how they choreographed the action. Well, a lot of it is like that, but it's also seeing all the details and the humor that's sort of underlying everything, or at least I take it that way. So anyway, looking forward to more Shaolin Cowboy, and I do sort of wonder why the colorist feels the sky always has to be sort of this yellow, orangey yellow. I like the sky on the cover. I think the orangey yellow could be cool here and there, but as a constant, I don't know. I don't know why that choice. I don't understand the aesthetics of coloring choices sometimes. But that doesn't really matter. It's still a really great comic. And it is a $5 comic. I'm trying not to get $5 comics, but this is, when it's a artist that's one of my absolute favorites. And on top of that, the story begins on the inside of the cover. Dark Horse is very cheap paper, unfortunately. And it goes to the very end. No ads. On the inside of the back cover, we get the credits. Oh, another interesting thing, and maybe I shouldn't be too hard on colorists of Jeff Darrow, sorry. Dave Stewart's the colorist, but there are 5 people who worked on the color flats, which is the preparatory. A lot of colorists use someone else to do what they call the flats, which is preparing the digital file for the more sophisticated level of coloring with a very simple level of coloring. So that's amazing that maybe this was so hard to get finished that he needed 5 assistants on the underneath levels of the coloring. So there you go, another video where I went on too long, and I thank you for joining me, and I will be back soon, no doubt.
Just what did this man from Mars say to you in Gotham Park, Mrs. Green?
I don't know. I don't speak Martian or Marsius or whatever you call it.
Well, that's understandable, since there is no life on Mars as we know it. There can be no intelligible Marsish language.
Did he threaten you in any manner?
Not exactly threatened me, but he certainly frightened me. It's not often I run into a man 3 feet tall.
No, 3 feet tall. Only your planetary yardstick.
But he did speak to you. And then he left in his flying saucer, Mrs. Green.
He was out of sight in a split second.
Mother McCree.
Well, I'm sorry to be so lacking in details, gentlemen, but I thought the incident should be reported.
Of course, Mrs. Green.
It is the duty of every good citizen of Gotham City to report meeting a man from Mars in a public park. Gotham City Penal Code, Section 32, subsection 14.
Yes. Thank you for coming.